Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Randy, the creative director here at Unique Design, and we're back with a new episode on how to start a clothing brand, a step-by-step process. Now, I know we've been gone for a while. It's been over a year since we started a video. We got a lot of stuff going on. We built a whole new studio just for YouTube, and we really wanted to make sure things were right before we took time to shoot more content for this. But nevertheless, we're back, and we have some great stuff for you. Today's episode is one of the most important things that you want to do when you want to start your brand. We're going to go over how to name your clothing brand. Now, not just how to name your clothing brand, but the steps that you want to take when you're coming up with a name, the things that you want to look for. So, before we jump into that, let's go ahead and get into our intro. Alright, you guys, so like I said, it's been over a year since we've shot a video, and the reason being was obviously we started doing during the pandemic. Things opened up, and obviously, we run our own 3 clothing brands, plus we design and print for other brands in-house, so we had to hit the ground running. We were up and running, we were working, and we really didn't have time to shoot any content, and we also bumped into problems that at the shop, we have all of our stuff out, our customer stuff, and they didn't really want their stuff being in the videos until it was out in the stores. And some of the stuff that we had, the clients really didn't want it to be in a video, and totally understandable. And we definitely gotta respect their brand and their company. So we decided to go ahead and just dive into it, and we built an entire new studio, which is the one you see behind me. So this new studio that we built, it's basically dedicated just so I can shoot YouTube video content for this particular channel on how to launch a clothing brand. Put a lot of stuff in the studio. We put mirrored almost what we have at the shop. There's a couple of different things, but obviously I have all my electronic resources that I need. Got a couple of things over here, stuff to mess around with. I got my 3D printer, so I can print stuff and kind of goof around with that. All my apparel swatches, everything is here basically just for inspiration. And inspiration to me is like one of the most important things. You got to have an inspiring environment to be creative. And so, as you can see, I am a designer, I'm a creative, so I have to create an inspiring studio for me to work out of. So anyways, now that we're in the new studio and now that we're shooting, I'm glad you guys had a chance to see that. We want to go over on how to name your clothing brand. And this is one of the most important steps about your brand, and a lot of people just come up with the name and they just throw things on a board and it sounds cool, and that's how they do it. But honestly, there's a lot of steps to go into it. But again, before we dive into anything else, we're going to need you guys to go hit subscribe to the channel. Obviously, the more subscriptions that we get, the more ability it gives us to put out more content. I actually want to put out some more downloadable content for you guys, and get you guys really on track on everything that you need to get your brand going. So like the video, comment, subscribe. Reach out to everyone, the people that have emailed me or messaged me on Instagram, are the ones who got me back on here doing this channel. So thank you for your support. And also just, thank you for kicking me in the butt to get me back out here to do this and really give you guys this important information. Okay, so let's get back into how to name your clothing brand. So when naming your clothing brand, the first thing you want to think about is, does it actually match your brand? And the reason why we say that is, we went a couple episodes earlier of, what a brand is, how to separate your brand, how to convey your brand. So when you come up with the name, you really don't come up with the name first. You figure out what your brand is about, you figure out your culture, and then you can come up with the name to kind of match your brand. So a lot of people kind of do it backwards. They come up with the name, hey, this is a cool name, and then they try to figure out everything around a name. And honestly, the name isn't as important as your brand, because I've seen some crazy names when it comes to clothing brands, and some names that I just didn't get, some names I thought were awesome. But at the end of the day, the name doesn't mean anything if it doesn't really match what your brand is about. So you really want to look into your brand, see what your brand culture is, jump in our other episodes about what a brand is and how to separate your brand. And that way you can kind of figure out a name that matches up with what your brand is about. So that's one of the most important things of when you're naming your brand. So when you kind of come up with the name, whatever the name is, because it doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what anyone thinks. The name, again, if as long as it matches your brand, you can work with it. Now, as soon as you come up with your name idea, say this is the name for my brand. I'm gonna throw anything out there that's active. There's a brand out there active, but just whatever it is, you want to jump and you want to do a trademark search. So before you go and do all this stuff about your brand, think it's awesome, and then the last thing you want to do is find out that that name has already been taken for clothing. Okay, so jump online, do a trademark search. I'm gonna put the resource for you to do that down here, so you can jump directly there. Do a trademark search for your brand name, and first of all, see if that name has been taken by another brand. Now, a trademark search is different than copywriting, because what a trademark does is it actually protects your brand likeness. A copyright just protects natural design, where a trademark protects your brand likeness, and we'll get into that. We're going to have a whole episode just on the legal terms for for how to build a clothing brand. We're going to have a whole episode on all the legal terms for you guys to look at and really understand the difference between copyright, trademark, business license, seller's permit, all that stuff. That's going to be another episode. So after you do a trademark search, and if you find out that name is not taken, that doesn't mean you're good to go, okay? Because, like I said, when it comes to trademarks, it comes to brand likeness. And so, that's a good search point to figure out, is that brand being used or anything. And if it's not trademarked, doesn't mean you can't use it, because some trademarks invoke the likenesses of something similar to their brand, so you won't be able to do that. So a lot of times you'll jump on Instagram, look and see somebody already has that name, but they don't have it trademarked. Unfortunately, you might be able to take their name and use it. You just can't use their likeness. So if you're not trademarked, you're not really protected, if that makes sense. So I don't recommend you to do too much with your name until you can actually get that name trademarked. But once you find out through a trademark search if no one has that name, and you find out that, just do your research, make sure that name isn't really taken for apparel. Somebody can use it for a car company. Someone can use it for cooking, as long as it's not in the apparel space, because trademarking protects you in your space of business. So that means, like, if I'm in the aeronautical industry or if I'm in the cell phone industry, there can be another company that uses the same name, but they can be in a different industry. So as long as it's not in the apparel, clothing industry, wearable goods, then you're fine. And again, do all your research, and then once you do that, then you want to take the next step. So the next step is secure your online assets. You figured out your name, you did your trademark search, you looked around, there's nothing similar. So first thing you want to do is you want to secure your online assets. So you want to get your domain name. You don't need to get your hosting and all that. Just grab the name before somebody else takes it. I've had this problem before. I worked with a company. We were working on their brand. We had a name. It was an awesome name. And we sent out to get the hang tags made at the time, because we weren't making them in-house. We sent them to another company. And so we went and got the hang tags made, and then they came back, and they didn't want to have the web, because they didn't want to leak anything out. But unfortunately, when we sent the hang tags out and then we got the hang tags back, we wanted to double check the domain name just to make sure, because we had printed on hang tags already. We went and double checked it, and guess what? Somebody stole the name. Now, they didn't have a website or anything, but they took the name, and the name was for sale all of a sudden. And we're like, wait a minute. This wasn't taken before. I advised them to go ahead and grab it, but unfortunately they didn't listen to me. But so someone took the name, and there was someone, just the domain name for like $5,000. So they end up paying the $5,000 just to get their own name. I have a feeling somewhere in that hang tag company, they saw the domain, they looked it up and found out it wasn't taken, and they decided that they're just going to snatch it. That's what I feel. But so first thing you want to do is grab your domain name, and I'll put all the links down low to where you can grab your domain name. The ones that we use, the companies that we use, they're a little bit more cost effective, but they're good quality. So instead of going through GoDaddy or whatever and you're paying an arm and a leg, there's better ways of doing it. So you get your domain name, and then obviously you want to go get your Facebook name. You want to get your Instagram name. You want to go get your YouTube name if you can. And then you want to get your Gmail secured. Now, on Facebook, I believe you have to have like a certain amount of followers in order to like secure an actual name. Or Instagram. No, Instagram, you can just make whatever you name. But for Facebook to actually have that URL, that's what I meant, your URL, you got to have like a certain amount of friends or followers on that brand before you can actually secure like unique design, Facebook / unique design. Because this is just going to give you like a number. So it's important that you go and get your followers, whatever you need to do, so you can actually get that dope URL for Facebook and YouTube. You got to have at least like 100 subscribers to get like your URL for YouTube. So make sure you get your domain assets secured as soon as you figure out your brand name and you get that trademark search done. So back to the name. When you're naming your brand, you want to say, does the name make sense? And what I mean is that, if your brand is known for a certain thing, or you have an idea for your brand, you don't want to name something that's just completely off, or it's going to completely throw people, for a loop. Like I said, let's say you're an apparel company that makes pajamas and, loungewear, you're sleeping, and then you name your company Hyperactive. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't name the brand. You're making apparel for people who want to sleep and lounge, but it's called Hyperactive. So people aren't going to understand that. So you want to make sure that the name, makes sense with your brand. The name, matches what you're trying to do. And with that being said, you don't want to have a crazy long name. I've seen sometimes it does work. Sometimes it does work. And let's take LRG for instance. Lifted Research Group. They couldn't get away with using Lifted Research Group. It's just too much. So they had to abbreviate it LRG, and it stuck. And at the time, it worked. And there's some companies that just, I've seen them, and it's like, if it's a whole sentence, first of all, it's hard to design a logo for a whole sentence, right? So, in my opinion, the name should be one word and maybe two words. That's it, you can't really get crazy with, a bunch of names. And a lot of times you can just drop the. So people have like, the creative, you can just call it creative, And with that being said, you can get creative with the way it's spelled. You don't have to spell the whole word creative. It could just be CRTVE or something like that. Something to like, incite people's interest so they can be like, oh, what is that about? And look more into it. But yeah, you don't want to have a crazy long name. And if you have to explain your name to people, that's already a red flag. If you tell somebody your name or your brand and they say, well, what was that? Or they confuse it for something else. Well, I thought you said this. That's already a red flag to you that, wait a minute, maybe I should rethink this name. So again, once we come to, naming a brand, one of the things that you really want to think of is the longevity of the name. And what I mean is, you're doing all this work to build a brand. The last thing you want to do is have a name that's not going to last with the brand. It's not going to last years from now. And, there's a lot of trendy things that are going on right now, and, a bunch of stuff it sounds cool now, but will it be cool or make sense 5 to 10 years from now? So that's kind of what you want to do, is you want to make sure the name is going to have longevity. It's not just going to be some gimmick name that everyone's saying right now. So yeah, if you have a name, let's say Lit. A lot of people were using the word Lit, and you name your actual clothing brand Lit or something in that terms. Like I said, who knows where it's going to be 5 to 10 years from now. I'm a 90s kid. Back in the 90s, we used to say dope. Dope was like, big word at the time. Now, if you say dope, people look at you like, man, you're old. I am old. But so with that being said, you really want to see the longevity of your name before you really focus on creating all these things, your logo, all this stuff around a name that 5 to 10 years now may not be around, So think about that as well. So also, you want to think about company name, brand name, okay? Now, there's a difference between a company and a brand. So if you have, let's just say, you have a weed company, right? There's some cannabis companies that I know. You have a name that's based on cannabis, right? Do you really want to open a bank account or a fictitious business name under a cannabis name? Some people just won't take that seriously. You know what I mean? So you're going to approach a bank manager for a business loan and say, hey, my company is called High. Get high all the time. Even though that's your clothing brand name, it's going to be really hard to do business work with a name like that. So sometimes you want to have a different business name for your business. Just call yourself, San Diego Assets. And under your business, your brand name can be High all the time. So that way your brand can work separately from your business. And again, we'll jump into an episode on that for the legal stuff a little bit later on. But a lot of times it makes sense to have a company is the mother company and then your brands. So like for us, our mother company is Unique Design. We have 3 different brands that run underneath Unique Design and a couple other services, but our actual company name is Unique Design. So that way, it doesn't confuse people when we're dealing with our other brands, because they're separate entities, but they are underneath Unique Design. They're LLCs, and again, we'll get into that later. But think about that importantly. Do you want your company name and your brand name to be the same? Because sometimes it's not a good idea. Also, when you're coming up with your company name, there's a thing that we call a tagline. Do you want to have a tagline that helps with your brand? Like for instance, Nike is "Just Do It," right? And you can think of all kinds of other companies that have taglines. So the tagline, it needs to be trademarked as well. But so you don't have to have a tagline when you first launch your company. But as you go, it might make sense to have a tagline so people can understand the direction of your brand a little bit more. So when you're thinking of your company name, if you already have a tagline that you want to put with it, you would go ahead and do a trademark search on that tagline as well. And if everything goes well, then you want to go ahead and trademark your company name, your brand name, and as well as your tagline. And they actually get trademarked together, and that's the way it works. So I think Monster Energy Drink says "Feel Your Energy," and Red Bull, as you have wings or something like that. But they're trademarked together with the company. So if you have a tagline that you want to put together with your brand, when you're doing the whole trademark thing, you put that package together. And I'm going to put an episode on how to trademark everything, so you can how to put your package together, where to go, and everything else for that. And we'll have that in a further episode, because I know that's a lot of information. And when you're trying to start a clothing brand, you're not thinking about that stuff. You're thinking about making cool stuff people want to wear. Last thing you want to think about is copyrights, trademarks, business licenses, fictitious business names. So we're going to have a whole episode just on the legal stuff for you guys, right? Exercise that we want to do once you figure out your brand name and everything works. You did a trademark search, you secured your assets or whatever it is. We want to do a visualization of your name. So what that means is jump on the computer in Illustrator, Photoshop, type out the name and see how the name actually looks, how it's spelled. There's a brand we're working with called Climate, and so they spelled the name Climate. And we looked at how as weird as it sounds, the letters, the C and the T and the L and the M, once we laid it out in the design format, it didn't really look well. Having the little C and the L, it just didn't balance it very well, and it didn't really convey itself visually, what we were hoping with the name of the town. So what we did is we played around with it, and we changed the letters to be KLYMTE. So it still says climate, but in a different way. But with that arrangement of letters, it gave us better design options so that we can design things a little bit better for them. It wasn't as long as Climate, and it looked more visually interesting. It was more intriguing the way it was spelled rather than using the actual word climate. So once you figure out your name, you want to visualize that name as far as putting it on your computer. Go in Illustrator, go in Photoshop, type it out. Use a couple of different fonts. And this is not designing the logo part of it. This is just really seeing how it's going to look spelled out. So you really want to kind of visualize that name, put it on there, and see how it's going to look. Okay? Just to reiterate, does that name match your brand? So make sure it matches your brand. And then do a trademark search. Make sure there's no trademarks, and for your name. And once you can figure that all out, visualize it, type it on your computer, make sure it looks good. And then also, once you get it all figured out, go ahead and submit your trademark. Grab your online brand assets, and pass the name around to a couple of people, a few trusted people. So one thing you learn is in the design world is that I've been doing this for 25 years. Last thing I want to do is show designs to a bunch of people, because what happens is, this is no disrespect to anybody, but the landscaper that they spent their whole life just doing landscaping, and I show them a design, and then they turn into a designer, and they're like, oh, you know what you should do? You should make it purple. Put a tail on it, add green, and they have no design experience, and so you don't want to just pass the name out to a bunch of people who have no idea in this space or anything. Get a couple of people that you trust their opinions based on their experience, not just their opinions, not their financial opinions or anything, because that has nothing to do with this. So pass the name to a few people that you trust, their opinion, and other people maybe you don't, and see what they think about it. And once you do all these things, then you can kind of come in here more confident with the name for your brand. So you can put that together and then start taking your next steps towards, securing your brand name and then working towards your brand. So we're going to wrap it up for this episode. We've got a lot of content, you guys. I really want to stay on track on this. I'm going to try to drop a new episode every single week for you guys. So again, please subscribe, please comment, please like the video. Let's spread this knowledge out here. I want to get as much downloadable content for you guys as we possibly can to really get your clothing brands off, the ground and where they need to be. So thanks for taking the time to watch this video, share it, whatever it is, and if you have any other questions, you guys, please leave the questions down there. And then, if you have something you want to see addressed in a future episode, put it in there as well. Because we're trying to keep the episodes in order, what it takes to start a clothing brand. But sometimes I'm going to veer off course because, there's some people a lot further along down. Or this is a topic that I'm really excited about covering. But if there's something that you guys want to see and you guys want to really, learn about, or just have my opinion on it, just leave a comment down there below. Ask questions and I'll do my best to get onto it. So other than that, you guys, have a great week. Good luck with your brands. I'm really excited to see what you guys got put together. And until then, you guys, have a great weekend.